All right, I want to start off by thanking everyone for making it tonight. This is my first town hall of the session, and I'm really excited to be co-hosting it with some amazing colleagues here. So just briefly introduce myself, Rep. David Ortiz. I represent House District 38, Littleton, in the western parts of Centennial. County line south. Oh my gosh, Bellevue is north. Colorado is to the east, and Pierce right by Columbine High is to the west. So Chris, you're up next, or Senator Kolker, I should say.
It's still a library. Still have to do something. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Kolker of Senate District 16. 2 years left in my hopefully first term. And I represent the boundaries starting at Quebec on the east side, going all the way out to Ken Carroll, to 470 Coal Mine, and down to Roxborough, across 470 down that way. So I've been shifted west. So I used to live on the very western part of my district. Now I live on the very eastern part of my district. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Representative Ruby Dickson. I represent District 37, which is almost all of Greenwood Village and Central Centennial with unincorporated Rapid County. So it's from County Line Road up to Bellevue, notch for Cherry Tree High School, Bellevue, and then west to Colorado and east past Parker Road to Foxfield. So really glad to be here. Thank you so much for so excited to tell you what we're working on and answer any questions.
All right, so we're going to start by talking about what specific bills we're working on. We're going to go down the line, and then we'll just jump right into engagement and interaction with Q&A, and see we can build up. What excitement we can build up for this session. It feels to me like we've been at it for a couple of months, even though we're 1, 2, 3, 6. But I'm excited. So first one I'll talk about is remedies for persons with disabilities. So when people with disabilities got added to the anti-discrimination protections back in 1314, there was some unintended consequences of the original language, which mandated that you either exhaust administrative means to try and secure basic access, or take it to trial. You cannot do both. And so what has been happening is bad faith actors have been using administrative fixes to constantly block basic access. So we're cleaning that up so you can do whichever one you want, whichever one's going to be the most effective at getting basic access. So accessibility in housing, working with CCDC and Disability Law and Housing Coalition to make sure that we're creating a mandate for accessibility in whether we're talking about townhomes, apartments, condos for 3 or more units, that's the 4. We're asking that new builds create 15% of the units type 1, which is accessible with wider doors, etc. We're asking for accessibility mandates around where those units are at. So if you're going to build them on the 2nd or 3rd floor, then it's an elevator. If they're going to build on the 1st floor, then there must be an accessible entrance. Mailboxes must also be accessible. So we've outlined and defined that very clearly. This is not just for the disabled community. This is for the aging. I've been working with a coalition that manages nursing homes and living facilities, and they've identified this as an issue of why we are overextended and overpopulated, not serve enough. There is a population that are going to these facilities that could live in community if they had accessible options to age into, especially when you couple that with home health care. Not to mention it's a safety issue for home healthcare workers that come in. Your home is accessible to you and you're able to be safe in there, then obviously they're able to work more safely and supporting. So this is trying to create a housing stock, not just for those that live with a disability, but also for those that are aging. Discrimination for persons with disabilities and the outdoors of Colorado. So y'all might know that I do love to downhill ski. I am an avid outdoor adaptive athlete. And my experience and that of many others is that the outdoors are not accessible, not in every way. And something I'm noticing, especially on ski mountains, is that they are prioritizing able-bodied people's comforts over my basic access to get on and off the ski lift. So I'm going to put a stop to that. Next is access to participate in state and local government. So basic access for this as well. Whether you are a candidate, an elected serving, or people coming to participate and lend your voice to the issues, we're mandating accessibility at all levels of government in places of work and places of participation for the community. We're also mandating an online option for those that live with a disability. We're not going to micromanage those, so like a school board will be able to decide what that looks like. You have to let us know 3 days before, 4 days before, if you're going to come and testify. We're not trying to micromanage, we're just saying you have to make this option available. We're also mandating an online option for our judiciary system. They've already been talking about this, but based on classifications of cases. They've never thought about it through the lens of creating access for people with disabilities. So I'm working with the DAs and others to put that on their plate and to build that into this bill. And also now, last but definitely not least, is about candidates being able to get on the ballot. For me, the most accessible way to get on the ballot was caucus. And I know there's a movement among both parties to get rid of caucus. Well, that is because they have ableist blinders on and don't understand that for me to try and go to every individual door, I cannot do that by myself. No candidate that lives with a mobility disability anyways can do that by themselves. Caucus is literally the most accessible way to get on the ballot. There's a reason why I'm the first with a mobility disability at the state capitol, and we change that. Thank you. So we're colloquially calling this this bill so kids can move. Basically, if you're under the age of 26, it's going to mandate coverage of one athletic prosthetic so that they can participate in sports and athletics the same way that able-bodied kids do. So really excited about that one too. Worked on a vet cemetery bill that allows the department to spend gifts, grants, and donations. So they're allowed to receive, but by oversight of the original state statute, they're not allowed to spend on support. I know. So it's just a small fix, but now they're allowed to spend gifts, grants, and donations to support the families and burials and the ceremonies that go around the veteran cemeteries. We're trying to continue military retirement tax exemption that we got in place in 2017. So this provides a deduction for the first $15,000 of your military retirement benefit. This is an attempt to keep skilled and amazing workforce that you find in your veterans, especially after 20 years of a career here. And the fact that we capped it at 15K is designed to help those that need it most. We're talking about enlisted and lower ranking officers. This has been shown to positively, disproportionately impact veterans of color, female veterans, because lower ranking tends to be more supportive. So trying to continue that as well. Working to create eviction protections for residential tenants, specifically those that are on fixed income like SSDI and those that live with a disability. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, plenty of others. I'm just gonna leave it there. I feel like I've been talking way too long already, so I'm gonna pass this off to Senator Kolker.
Give it up. Give it up. I always do. I really do. So a lot of different bills that we do are based on our experiences, as you heard from Rep. Ortiz, and what we live with on an everyday basis, and what we experience. I'm in my third year becoming, as you are, we're becoming more comfortable with what we're doing and able to be, I think, stronger advocates for the people that we represent. And it's I know in my first year I was drinking from a fire hose, so it's good that we have this opportunity with some experience, but the things that are different today are different challenges than when I started, because we have a 23-person majority in the state Senate, 23 Democrats versus 12 Republicans. So there's a lot of different things that I'm focusing on. With my background in finance, I'm going to start there. I focus on, based on some of the committees that I'm on, tax policy and para, the para oversight, the para pension. How many para members do we have here tonight? Okay, so we're all para members. So and so if you're a para member, you know that you have champions up here are going to keep fighting to keep para funded, making sure that the promise we made in 1931, that promise is going to be kept, because para has been around longer than Social Security. One of the bills that I'm doing is a true up. It's a $35 million fiscal note, which keep getting pushed back. It's not going to happen. 35 million to get to make up for what we did not pay in 2020. We're supposed to put in $225 million a year. In 2020, we didn't. So simple math, we have about 35 million left to go, and I am digging deep into the budget, finding ways and arguments to say, we do have the money, see? So I've been working on that here for the last 2 weeks. I did get the first bill across in the Senate. Online vehicle sales protection for consumers is going to the House now. Didn't have a fiscal note, so that's a good thing. And basically what it's doing is taking car dealerships, people who sell online cars into the state. They don't have to register in the state, but because they don't have to register, there's no consumer protection. So this bill is going to provide consumer protection because a lot of people who buy cars from some of these services aren't getting the service they need. They're not getting the car registration, not getting the title. And so we heard a lot of complaints. And so that's why that bill went forward. Those are, and I also had another bill pass through. It's been sent to appropriations. It's the SAFER Act. It's a continuation of the emergency radios that school districts have. It's a grant program. It's about $5 million a year. We're just continuing that program. We have more people, more school districts, 178 school districts. We have more school districts asking for this money than money we have to give. And what it does is it gives staff members at schools direct access to first responders. They can bypass 911. So when there's an emergency, something happens, they have direct access. And the company that makes these radios is located over by Centennial Airport here in Arapahoe County. So I'm glad to partner and keep that program going. Working on earned income tax credit and child tax credit expansion. That is state credits for people of lower incomes, making sure that, again, with this high cost of living, we're giving people every chance they can to make a living and raise a family. So that's a big bill too, that's coming up. And I want to go over a last one here before going into too many. I have two other bills. One is important to me, social detriments for behavioral health for kids. If you're someone under age 21 and you're trying to get Medicaid help to go see a counselor to get behavioral health therapy, right now the way it's set up is you have to have a diagnosis. Well, it's kind of the chicken before the egg. So we're going to fix that. We're going to, anybody who's under 21, in certain, what we call social detriments, this is something we're working on. So if you're food insecure, housing insecure, a lot of people on Medicaid are already that, you're automatically qualified to get that therapy. You don't have to have a diagnosis. So again, trying to expand our behavioral healthcare system, especially to those on the Medicaid system. And the final one, which hasn't been introduced yet, so we need your help to get it introduced. There's a lot of reasons being held up. A lot of reasons we don't know why it's being held up, but it's our version of PLACA. It's a federal law to allow civil suits for people who have been victims of gun violence to file suit against gun manufacturers. Gabby Giffords, it's her #1 bill. If you don't know who Gabby Giffords is, it's her #1 priority. We're one of 4 states that give excess immunity to gun manufacturers, more than the federal government allows. In fact, there's 17 states that don't give any immunity at all. And one of those states, one state just north of us. So why are we giving more immunity? And so she's coming into town for a town hall next Wednesday, and we need a lot of outside voices to let people in the Senate and in the House know that we want this bill. So make sure you're vocal about that. I appreciate it.
Really amazing pleasure stuff, and very excited to be able to on it. So as I said, I'm Representative Dickson, and I am working on a whole bunch of stuff. As Senator Kolker noted, this is my first term, so it is very much like drinking fire hose, and I learning quite quickly about what sort of things can happen when you're working on bills in the State House. But really proud to announce that my first bill, which is about reducing lead exposure and lead poisoning in children, has passed the House. as of Monday. That was really exciting. And that bill actually passed unanimously out of with both Democratic and Republican support. And I'm also excited to say that my second bill also passed unanimously out of committee. So I'm really very focused on trying to pass common sense policies that everyone can agree on. And so far, I've had a lot of success with that. And all of the bills that I'm working on have some bipartisan support or at least bipartisan interest. But I'm always looking on things that you'd like to see from me. So that said, I'll get into what the policies actually are. So the first bill is on lead exposure. This was a bill that was requested by the Department of Public Health, basically to fix some problems that were apparently typos in actual statute written back in. And it just cleans up some things to allow the Department of Public Health to enforce lead regulations to make sure that children in child occupied facilities, which is basically daycares, are not exposed to lead. I have a lot of personal interest in this topic, and so I was really excited to on this policy. The one that just went through today is to authorize Office of the Future of Work to start looking into transition for workers who are impacted by the oil and gas, and also workers who are impacted by automation, actually might lose jobs. So that one was a very robust bill. We had tons of discussion about that with all different people all over the state. And ultimately that is now going to the so hopefully find cash to make that happen. So it's really important for people all across the state. I'm also really interested in policies that will help Colorado to be at the forefront of climate policy, both because I think it's necessary for the planet, but also because I think Colorado has some of the incredible resources that make it possible for us to manage some of this stuff, and it can really help our economy. So with that said, I'm working on a bill on carbon management. So this would ways to start just looking into how do we as a state allow for the development of new technologies that pull atmospheric carbon out of the air and also prevent it from being emitted in the first place. And then once we have that carbon, to figure out what's so how do you transport it safely? How do you put it somewhere safe? How do we take care of our environment in a way that doesn't perpetuate harmful industries in our state? And I've gotten some really great bipartisan interest from that one as well. Really looking forward to working on it. Along the same vein, I'm also working with the Energy Office on geothermal. Colorado has incredible geothermal resources, but we don't really have a regulatory structure that allows it to be scaled up and to be commercially viable in the state. So I'm working with the Energy Office to find ways that we can make that happen. I think it's a really exciting way to follow through on some of the promises of my other bill for workers who are impacted by transition gas. There's a lot of transferable skills for geothermal, and so workers are really excited for that bill. I'm also working on a bill for TABOR refunds. So many of you received $750 checks from single filers and $1,500 checks for dual filers last year. But there was a wrinkle in the process that meant that you had to file taxes in order to get this refund. And if you were too poor to file taxes or otherwise not required to file them, you had this sort of arbitrary deadline of mid-October of last year. And so there are a lot of people, vulnerable people, states do not have enough income to have to file taxes, and who were not informed at the time to meet this deadline, miss out on what would be a really life-changing part. So I'm working on a bill to give them a second chance to get the money that they need to, and this doesn't cost us any extra because we're already not allowed to use that money. I'm also working on a bill to increase housing supply. This would lower the cost of housing for many people across the state. And this bill is definitely still in development, but we're working very closely with the governor's office, has been having a year-long stakeholding process to try to get all of the voices that they can to understand what we need to address the housing crisis across the Front Range and statewide. So very excited for that one. And finally, I just wanted to highlight, I am a member of the Women's Caucus, and there are several bills that are pushed by the Women's Caucus this year We really want to follow through on the election promises that we made to protect people in the state of Colorado having of good health care. So there's going to be a lot of things coming from this. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to that. I also, not bill related, but I have a few announcements that I think might be helpful to just let you guys know. So if you are members of the Democratic Party, it's a Democratic York happening, free to get in touch if you want to be involved in that and to be involved in Pretty Fair. Also, the Joint Budget Committee is having a lot of public meetings over the next couple of months, and this is a chance for you to weigh in. So items in the budget that you'd like to understand more about or comment on, get in touch and about that. And then finally, I just want to say thank you again for being here. And just a reminder that I'm in my first year, so learning a ton. And so please give us grace as a new office here, because we are getting hundreds of emails a day and we're just trying to figure out how to deal with all that. But really appreciate the chance to talk to you all and looking forward to your questions.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm on the Energy and Environment Committee and the Transport, Housing, and Local Government.
Transport,
Yes, transportation.
does that include 70?
Yes.
During session, I'm on the Finance Committee, Education. Outside of session, I am on the Tax Policy Committee. The para, right now, chair of the Para Oversight Committee. Also the chair of the Insurance Committee. So just, I'm sure I'm missing another one somewhere, but I'm on a bunch outside of session too, so.
All right. Now, time to for everyone's, oh yeah, my committees. I'm on Health and Insurance and Save Mill Veterans Affairs. So those are the two I'm on. All right, got some of your questions. We will do a spontaneous part, but we've got, I'm gonna let Kolker pick the first one. I'll do my topic. We got 2 gun safety questions. We got housing plan question, a vets question, and a tax and rent question. Which one? All right, pick up first go. Gun control. Will you be able to ban AK-47 type weapons? Can you overturn a veto? So
I'm on the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus also, a caucus that was formed this year to organize and try to make sure that we're helping each other, supporting each other when it comes to gun violence and gun violence legislation. When it comes to the assault rifles, a ban, I can only speak that I don't think the bill has been introduced yet. It's something that the sponsors are working diligently on. It is, something that I've always said that I was for since I started running for office. We take a look at weapons of war, things like that. What is their purpose? Will we get it through this year? I don't know. I really can't say. Remember, we're not taking away guns. Any of our legislation is not taking away guns. Going out to people. These are really to prevent more guns being on the street that shouldn't be on there. One of the other big issues I know that we've talked about is ghost guns. And if you haven't heard of ghost guns, these are manufactured parts and even 3D printed guns that do not have serial numbers. And so we want to tackle that also as a big priority. Do we have enough votes to override a veto when it comes to the assault rifle? I don't know. Until we get to that point, I really won't know. I don't know where people stand. But it's the more people we hear from, the more voices, the louder you are, better it is, to get your point across. So it's so early in the session. Bill hasn't even been introduced yet. I know we're working on a couple other ones. They are the expansion of ERPL, the red flag law, delaying when you can pick up a gun after purchase, and also age 21 and older to purchase a gun. So those are other ones that I think are amongst the priorities.
Why do you government? So, yeah.
I don't know if he opposes it specifically. I don't know if he's ever said he opposes it. I think it is if we talk to our stakeholders. And we talk to the people who are in the lobby for gun violence prevention. We look at assault weapons are used in mass shootings, right? But how many shootings are happening every day? And what weapons are being used there? And what can we prevent on a daily basis? I mean, there was just a shooting in Littleton last night. So what do we need to do when it comes to that prioritization?
And just to remind everyone, please don't shout out questions, raise your hand and wait to be called on. I want to make sure everyone up here gets a chance to answer the same question.
But do appreciate the engagement. I'm also on the gun violence prevention caucus, and what I will say about that experience is that it is really inspiring how much passion we have in that caucus to get things done in Colorado. And we have had so many conversations where people just were dozens of policies that people are actually going to carry many of those this year, and many of the ones that are just really exciting. So I think there will be a lot of support of policies like that, and it's just a question of whether we to make that the law in the state of Colorado. And I guess I hope so, but see.
And I'm not going to say anything new. Obviously, I'm waiting to see and allow time for the bill sponsors to negotiate this and be able to bring this forward. I'm going to just be honest and say there was a stakeholder that operated in bad faith and leaked the bill while it was being drafted. Rocky Mountain Gun Owner Association made a big deal about this, and Brett started flooding into the inboxes of both sponsors. So they are being very judicious and deliberate. I understand we're all excited to see what it's going to look like. Give them the time and patience to make sure that they get the bill where they need to, that gets the best chance of passing. Let's see. I want to, because let's do a follow up with red flags. That was you mentioned it briefly, but the question here is, what will legislature do to put teeth in Herbo?
It's a tough one. It's not my bill. Senator Sullivan has been working on that bill, and I know we're trying to do some expansion of it for medical, behavioral health professionals and teachers, counselors. The teeth on that's a tough one. I'm not privy to what's going to go in, because that's also a bill that hasn't been introduced yet. So I can't speak specifically to that.
Also can't speak to it. I'm not on that particular bill. One thing that I will say is that last year with the Club Q shooting, that was a horrific tragedy where red flag law had been invoked. And it wasn't that the red flag law didn't have teeth, it was that people with a lot of power locally in El Paso County were not interested in law. And so that's a question of, I'm not sure it didn't have enough teeth, but there's some other problem. Figure out how to solve that when local people on the ground that are not as interested as solving that problem.
And obviously, I'm super supportive of anything that strengthens the red flag bill. Is no BS common sense gun safety bill, and the fact that some of these county officials feel like they can, on their own, or sheriffs on their own, decide that it shouldn't be enforced is criminal. So I'm going to be looking for supportive of something that holds them accountable in a criminal way if they decide. So actually, Chris, you got two questions just directed at you. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask that. Keep you in the hot seat, and then Ruby pick the next topic after this. So one is there a bill being introduced to create a state bank, and would you support it?
On the state bank, no, I'm not that I know of a bill that's being introduced, and at this time I don't know enough information to be supported. I know there's only one state bank in the entire country. It's in North Dakota, and at this time I can't commit to that. Not having enough information.
All right, and this is from Noah earlier. This little girl. Thank you for helping to pass the universal pre-K bill. It is quite limited though. Only covers 1 day a week, and only for 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds with qualification limits. with daycare so unaffordable, any chance to expand to be actually universal?
Well, I think, you know, that is, you know, news to me on the 1 day a week is we just approved the behavioral health, or excuse me, the early childhood director in our education committee. And, you know, we had talked about in that committee that there's going to be so many hours a day that it's going to be available for. So check with your pre-K provider on that, because it should be more than 1 day. It should be practically every day, but just a few hours. We're seeing about 60% of the providers are private providers, but let me get that right. 60% of the seats are in schools. So, you know, it's a combination of a public-private partnership, and, you know, trying to make sure we're balancing that and finding the money for it. We're going to have over $1 billion most likely in payment refunds this year again. And we look at that, you know, lots of good can be done. I said this in my coffee a couple of weeks ago. When we're making decisions on financial policy as an electorate, when we get a referendum, please understand what you're voting for and how it works. Because when you vote to lower our income taxes, but yet you vote for more services, it puts us in a bind. So just keep that in mind.
And I'll just follow up with that by saying, the Latino caucus met with Governor Polis yesterday, and his focus is making sure we're expanding access to affordable childcare. Like, he mentioned that specifically in the short time that we had with him. And if you're looking what his values are for the next few years, he's expressed it to us this way: people, planet, prosperity. In that order, that's what he wants to focus on. So, all right, you can choose the next topic. We've got rate hikes in Excel. We've got criminal justice, taxes, housing plan, mental health, taxes and rent control, veterans.
So go for veterans.
Oh, wow, that's a lot of categories. I'll take the first one, Excel and.
Or two.
All right. What can legislature do about Excel's rate hikes?
Okay, that is a big question. So I have been having a lot of conversations with the representative for Excel in the building. There's so much to learn about Excel. It's just amazing how much of a rabbit hole it is. Excel is one of the only utilities in the state that is actually regulated under the Public Utilities Commission. So there is more that the state can do about Excel than almost any other utility provider. So that is something that we have going for us. One thing that I also learned is that the reason that Excel is able to make record profits right now is because the Public Utilities Commission that is run by the state and it's overseen by that I serve on, basically allowed them to issue what are essentially bonds to make a certain percentage of profit on infrastructure building over the last few years. And that infrastructure, much of it is needed, but I think it's really worth to why the PUC felt it was so necessary to allow Excel to take such a huge cut of profits on top of the costs, given the fact that they are a utility that is a monopoly, that they are granted a monopoly by the state over many of the customers. It does seem questionable that we thought it was a good idea to just give them a huge slice of profits without any sort of analysis of the natural gas prices that might be coming at the same time that those bond payments are to kick in. So that's definitely something that we are looking into on the Energy Environment Committee to see why is it that the PUC so favorable to Excel's shareholders in those decisions versus Excel's ratepayers, and it's something that having a lot of conversation about. And I also think it's worth noting that some of the increases in Excel bills, the fact that natural gas is a global market and Excel has the ability to pass on 100% of the cost of those, of the baseline resources to the customers. And so some of that cost is just the fact that, you know, there's a war going on in the biggest producers of natural gas in the world. And there's just a lot of complications in national markets that really compound with also starting those infrastructure. So it's very complicated, but I am looking into it to the extent that we on the profit margin that they are mandated to collect.
Great answer. Okay. I will pick the topic now. I guess I'll go with veterans. So so Colorado's DBA and CVSOs are to serve vets per Colorado state statute. That is not happening. When is Colorado's VA committee is going to begin to hold the DBA and CVSOs accountable? So kind of was already writing an answer on the back here. Like, I think the first step is to reach out to your state senator and state representative, because this is just saying that they don't do that without giving any details like that, I can't do anything with that. But so the way that my office prefers to receive information so that we can turn it into very actionable and concrete items is, one, put like your bottom line up front. Like, for example, like VA is not meeting my healthcare needs, or my VSOs aren't serving me when it comes to helping secure my benefits. Like that right at the top. Next, I like bullet points on what the problem is, and then what you would like to see out of the solution, and then a narrative that's very helpful. So these are the things these are kind of tools that arm us to be able to find a resolution for you. And if we can identify systemic failures, come up with systemic fixes. So, and that applies, at least for my offices, that applies to any personal issue that you might be faced with that you're looking for some help with. I find that the most useful in being able to serve my constituents and other people's constituents, because let's be honest, like I am the veteran guy, so I have people from all across the state reaching out to me, or I am the disability rights guy, so I have disabled individuals from across the state reaching out to me. And this is kind of the way I format things. This is the most effective way that I can have that. So I don't know if y'all think differently when it comes to constituents coming to you for problems, or how you would like to engage.
I'll do you.
Okay.
So the way that I got started in politics was through constituent services. So I have been very close to this question. And I'll just say, if you're having a problem, reach out to us. Turns out that it's a federal agency, will connect you with relevant, federal representative. And there are people in these offices that can help you with these problems. So if you're having a problem, come to us. And like Representative Ortiz said, if it's just a one-off, find somebody who can address that problem for you. And if it turns out to be systemic, then we'll see what we can fix that. The bill that I said that I'm trying to run regarding Tabor refunds for normal members of our community, we found out about that problem because constituents came to us and said, we're having this problem and the Department of Revenue is not helping. So that's an example of how, if you come to us, we will do our best to solve it, whether it means just connecting you with the right person or running a bill to change the policy so it doesn't happen.
Just on that point, what they both said, constituents, you are very important in bill ideas, and for us to absolutely understand what's going on in life, what's going on in our world, to help fix any problems. And a constituent called today, and they said, have the senator run a bill on testing on animals. Great. As Representative Ortiz said, we need bullet points, we need details, we need to know what stakeholding needs to be done, what is the problem, what we're trying to fix, what do we currently have in statute that might already address that, and maybe it's just an awareness issue. So thank you.
And to piggyback off of what Representative Dickson was saying, like our federal delegation is really responsive to us. We have a great relationship. Yeah. So sometimes they will meet with us as a group. Sometimes they'll meet with us as subgroups. Like Crow was meeting with Congressman Crow was meeting with us around the immigration crisis. And when I say us, I mean the Latino caucus, right? So there are lots of different ways that we can help build that relationship and find solutions. And an example of a problem that has multiple parts, one area that I can solve or cannot would be access when it comes to air travel for people with disabilities, for example. And I can reach out and touch the airport, and they've been very cooperative and collaborative, like I can pass laws to reach out and touch them. But because of the Federal Air Carriers Act, I cannot touch airlines, to my ever frustration, but I do have close relationships with the federal delegation and working so that they can reach out and touch the airlines. So that's an example. All right. Oh, okay, someone had a follow-up to that question?
The Tabor refund, would that person need to be here legally?
They have to be-
Yeah.
they have to be a taxpayer.
So, as Senator Kolker said very quietly, they have to be a taxpayer. So they have to be able to file their taxes. However, there was I believe, please do not hold me to this, but I believe that there was a bill that was passed last year to make that somehow accessible for people who are taxpayers, but maybe not citizens.
Maybe not a citizen?
Yes. Okay. But I don't hold me to that, but if you have someone who's that information, I can find it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Ruby, I'm gonna let you have the next choice. So we got mental health, criminal justice, taxes, housing plan, and I'm gonna put rent control under housing, and child welfare.
Housing.
All right, I'm gonna ask both, and then we will answer it, all of us together. So the first question is, can you tell us more about Governor Polis' statewide housing construction zoning plans? One. The other one's around rent control. Too many people cannot afford to have any place to rent affordably in Colorado. What are we in? So since you picked the topic, I'm gonna let you go first.
Guys, that's a very good question. So I am not the governor, and so I cannot speak for him fully. I can tell you what I do know, and that is that we have a housing shortage in the state. We are tens of thousands of short of where it would be normal and healthy housing market to have. And that housing shortage, that cost of housing is really driven up, especially for renters in the state. So this is a crisis all across the state, and certainly here in the Front Range, we are feeling it. Certainly my district is one of the top things I've heard that are really concerned about the cost of housing, both for themselves and for their families. So as I said, one of the problems here is that there's a housing shortage. And so the governor's plan is to try to whatever levers we can to increase the housing supply across the state. What that means, it does entail something that a term that I actually first heard at a town hall of yours with Senator Bridges on it's called gentle density. So the idea is we're not asking to go and build high rises in residential single family zones, but that it should be possible for a property owner to decide that they want to build an accessory mother and suite backyard, or they want to build a duplex and allow somebody to move in so that they can pay their mortgage that way. These kind of like slightly higher density than we currently have with single zone areas is something that could be really helpful to expand the housing supply without really changing that much the fabric of rights. There has been some concern, and I'm sure that many of you are thinking it about home and local control. They are state, and so there's a lot of conversation going on about that. And I don't want to step on governor's toes because that's a very fragile conversation. But what I will say is that that is a great segue in rent control topic, because currently state has a ban on any locality enacting rent stabilization time. And so one option could be to exert some state control over certain kinds of zoning to allow very slightly denser housing in certain areas, within the bounds of the infrastructure. But give municipalities power that they did not previously have to stabilize rents and to potentially, forth some standards so that that stabilization measure is fair and equity carried out. But that generally having this power is something municipalities have been asking for decades. And I think that it's really great.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, what Rep Dickson is talking about is a bill sponsored by Rep Javier Mabry, and it's HB 23 1115 for those that want to follow along. It's the repeal prohibition, local residential rent control. So that's currently being worked on. And just to piggyback off of what Rep. Dickson said about the gov's priorities, like it is about increasing overall stock. And again, you have to think back to his values of people, planet, prosperity, right? So he does want to create gentle density specifically around mass transit ways, because that is something that will positively impact us combating climate change and preserve the environment. It also ties into water rights a lot as well. He mentioned that during our conversation. And his goal is to allow people to have a path toward ownership. That is his big focus as well. That being said, and I appreciate Rep. Mabry during our listening caucus for speaking up about this, is that we need to stabilize rents, because how can you think about getting a down payment on a home or affording to own if you cannot, if 3/4 or your entire income paycheck to paycheck is going for housing expenses. So we do, between the gov and the legislature, we do have a pretty star-studded cast, amazing team that is working on the housing issue when it comes to that. So I think that's all I have to follow up and say about Jim.
I can just say this about the rent control issue as a local control issue. We hear arguments all the time from those on the other side of the aisle about local control and how important that is. Well, we're not giving them local control on rent control right now, so why not give it to them?
And we have a follow-up on that topic.
Governor should be aware that they took shortage. State really should step up. Big housing, very essential.
I mean, I definitely appreciate that opinion. My rebuttal would be everyone has fallen. Like, there's not a state in this country where housing has not skyrocketed. You point to me an example where the cost of housing has stayed the same or lowered, then I will admit that there was someone in this nation that got ahead of the game and was proactive. I think we all as a nation got caught flat-footed on what's going on around housing and the housing crisis. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that I've seen rising rents, whether we're talking about Colorado, California, North Dakota, South Dakota, BFE, North Carolina. Like that is the symptom everywhere. So I really don't think that anyone foresaw this and was proactive enough to prevent this. And I think there are factors outside of what we do statewide or nationally that have also, and I mean, Representative Dickson touched on this, on what's going on around the globe that have impacted this as well. That being said, that's no excuse. We need to act now. And last year we invested over $500 million in creating affordable, attainable housing stock. We're going to keep doing that same work. We're not just going to tend to housing, but we're also going to look to make sure that rents become more affordable.
Democratic Party. We have a golden opportunity. The state to central. Housing.
100%, sir. I'm going to let Rep. Dickson take the mic.
And I appreciate you highlighting the urgency of this issue. I totally agree. There are so many families and households all across the state that are really struggling with this. And it is imperative that the act as soon as possible to ease this pressure on. Both because it's the right thing to do, and also because it will free up money in their pockets to actually help the rest of the economy. It's good for everyone to fix this problem. And just want to highlight something that weirdly none of us mentioned, which is Prop 123 passed on the ballot last year, which, you know, Senator Kolker's comments about fiscal difficulties regarding that notwithstanding, it does mean that we are getting hundreds of millions of dollars into an affordable housing fund that one of the people that I'm on is trying to oversee some of the disbursement of that. There is a lot of really exciting stuff going on. Well, and said that's super complicated, but we kind of had chunk.
And we do have one more follow-up with Gretchen right in the back.
Yeah, hi, I'm on the city council. And thank you.
Yeah, of course, I will say that I've already signed on as a sponsor, so yes. Great. I'm gonna pick, we're kind of starting to come to the end on time, so I'm gonna pick the last topic. I really want to take a personal privilege and say that the next topic is criminal justice. So there's two questions here. Raise the floor. This bill will raise the age that youth can be detained, arrested, and tried as adults from 10 to 13. Will you support it? So I'll speak for myself. Yes, I'm definitely going to be supporting that.
My oldest daughter is 10. I can't imagine her being tried as an adult. So yes.
Also, yes, still seems like 13 is a bit low.
Yeah, yes.
So the question on the back is the line to youth. This was a bill that was actually brought forward last year that because of poor calendaring and the fact that the Republicans were filibustering died on the vine. So if you're not familiar, it just doesn't allow law enforcement to lie to kids. That's kind of the heart of what the bill will do. Lie to kids. It does not lie. Lie. Yep. So is the question whether we're going to support it or not?
Person who asked it.
Yes, okay. Yes, I was gonna support it then. I'm definitely gonna be supporting it now.
Yes, and it's a little bit different this year than it was last year. And I don't know the differences. I have to look at those, but based on what I know so far, yes.
Yep, I do plan to support it. I think that it's important that have a good relationship with law enforcement. And I think this is just the wrong dynamic. Law enforcement is allowed to abuse that trust with children.
Will they still be allowed to lie to adults?
All right. And we will round out with mental health. So HB 23-1003 about school health mental health assessments is being discussed now. How do you feel about the provision that allows students to keep their results hidden from their parents? Do you think this undermines the family? Okay, I have not read the bill, so I don't know what the characterization is. I'm going to speak to other bills where we, for example, the Healthcare Equity Act, we didn't mandate rental notice. I think that can be a critical part in, say, a family that might be not supportive of the pregnant person kind of taking ownership of what they want to do. I can see landmines being the same issue. That being said, I need to read the bill itself before I'm willing to answer with definitivity that whether I'm going to support it or not. So I think parental involvement is critical. It is important. That being said, I'm going to speak belonging to the LGBTQ plus community. I'm going to speak, having that intersectionality is sometimes you need to be ready with the decisions you're making before you go or feel comfortable going to your parents. So again, parents should definitely have a direct role. I know the fact that I, in my opinion, turned out so great because my parents were very heavily involved in my life, in my schooling. I could talk to them just about anything, but not everyone is fortunate enough to have a family like I had. So I need to read the bill and I'll get the details and I will get you an answer on that. Exactly.
I agree. I have not read the bill, but not everyone is as fortunate as I am. I have a family, my mom here today, and I could always tell my mom anything, sure did, but not everybody has that. And I think in order for these kind of screenings to be the school, they have to have some privacy, because it's your mental health that can be incredibly private information, and it can be results or it can be reflective of problems. Kids can't find care that they need unless they're able to be honest in the situation. Many of these providers are already mandated orders, so situations there is a risk to that child or others, there would still be ways to help with that. But I think it makes sense to have some degree of privacy between a child and their
And I can speak to the bill specifically. I have read the bill. It's a Representative Mike Cingenna's bill. And I've already been in discussions about this bill. My wife is a middle school counselor over here in Wilton School District. And there's already changes being made, being amended to the bill. Because right now it talks about assessments. Assessment is just, I think, the wrong word. What they're trying to make this is more of on the lines of when kids get their hearing and their vision checked at school. Is there a simple way to do a mental health check on kids? This isn't really going into that deep dive of what an assessment would do. This is just to get a pulse of what's the mental health for the child. That being said, a lot of times with our bills, you know, they're black and white, and we live in a gray world. And so exactly what my colleagues have said, I can speak to what my wife has gone through as a counselor, of where there's kids coming in and they don't want to tell their parents or their parents to be involved, because it is a problem at home. The problem is starting at home. And so these are situations that have to be monitored on a case by case basis. And when we put it in law, sometimes it makes it black and white, but it's not. And we have to have trust in our professionals. So that's what I'll say about that. The bill is still being worked on. Again, it's not deep dive into assessment, but more of a on the same lines as vision, hearing, mental health check.
We're gonna go to spontaneous Q&A. I'm gonna leave. We're gonna go 5 minutes over as long as that's okay with y'all.
I'm here all night.
We will take these questions and we'll make sure we get answers for y'all. Like, we're gonna keep these cards and get answers. Like two of them are about taxes, one's about the PAC Act for veteran healthcare. So we'll make sure that we get you answers. So let's open it up for questions from the floor.
Senator Kolker have a resource office bill, have sponsors in the House. How can we support you that?
Thank you. So the question is, I have a school resource officer bill. My school resource officer bill has been tamed down a bit. We're going to rewrite it to make it safe to tell in school resource officers. So training for school resource officers and how they use safe to tell, how they incorporate the information they receive from that. I am going to be working on a bigger bill for next session, because it got to be such more information. There's more fiscally involved. What I ultimately want to see is a uniform standard of training for school resource officers. That's required for every school resource officer, not encouraged, which is what is in current law. And you can blame my wife for that, because she's the one that really said, you know, hey, I have a really good school resource officer. How do we make sure that that is, you know, uniform across the state? So we have a lot of stakeholders to work with. An SRO can be a 4-letter word to some people, so we have to be careful.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator Newell.
Go to when you were to legislate for is the leader.
I mean, right, just mentioned one of the top of my head is Representative Michael Cingenna is definitely one that I think go to right away. I don't know if you guys, I mean, there's a whole host of them. Others. What about, oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, Representative Doherty's really good, especially when it's fixing the law around child welfare. I feel like she works on a lot of the systemic stuff. So letter of the law. In the Senate. All right, well, there you go.
Young.
And that's right, yeah, Representative Young.
Representative.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And Senator Danielson, that's right. Okay. Great. Sir.
I'd like to make a comment on affordable housing. It's gonna sound. I spent 12 years. President. Since then, I've been involved. I'm really. United States. And I think the thing that not only we're on, not disagreeing with zoning, funding, giving the private sector for incentive. For that's why my clients have spent 90. It's not that the state has paid, states have paid, but they are tax incentives for both private entity. It's leveraging the private sector that I think that we're missing out on. Right? Federal government runs the program now, but some states do as well. And there's just a tremendous private.
I appreciate that input, and I couldn't agree more. My concern here is that Colorado is wholly unique in the nation and that we have. There you go, that's the right now. And so we are limited in, our hands are tied in a way that other states don't tie their legislators' hands. So if we're looking to give incentive through tax cuts, that means we're not funding something. Like we're not funding I Matter program that gives 6 free mental health care visits to our children. We're not funding healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid. We're not funding. I mean, there is a calculus that goes into it. I think what makes it particularly difficult here in Colorado that no other state faces is Tabor. And like my talking point about Tabor is, I don't care who you are, in a time when red states are taking away the rights of women and taking away the rights of LGBTQ plus community, not a single other state has a law like Tabor. Why? Because it's fiscally irresponsible and it is trash. And it is hurting Colorado. So I agree with you 100%. I'll take over to Tabor.
All right. Private.
Yeah,
Yes. All right.
perfect. Thank you. Dr. Perry.
When are we gonna get rid of?
Yeah.
Up to you.
Thank you. That is, I mean, we always bring, that is, we bring forward ballot initiatives are brought forward every so often to try and get rid of Tabor and has yet to succeed. So really, it's about getting involved with the stakeholders that are taking on the ballot initiative and supporting them the same way you supported us, knocking on doors, making phone calls, donating to their funds so they can spend money advertising for it. So it's on all of us when it comes to that.
Sign us all up.
Just one piece of information that might be helpful about these kinds of ballot initiatives. So they are extremely expensive to run. And you might imagine that the people that have the most amount of money to spend on advertising are the same people who are most afraid of the very wealthiest in our state. Some of the lowest taxes in the entire nation because of cheaper. And because we have conformity clause, we can't have progressive taxation in Colorado. And because of that, those people have tens, hundreds of dollars that they are willing to spend. And so whatever, if you're gonna try to get rid of Tabor, it has to be full of society effort. That is a serious David and Goliath situation.
Pay attention to Colorado Fiscal Institute, Building a Better Colorado, a couple of groups, and the Bell Policy Center.
Joan, you've had your hand up for a little bit.
And so since we're on taxes, I know that this is one of the taxes and property tax. Now, I understand that sending money back to paper, but it costs a lot of money to send this back. So I understand why you don't do that. But I'm sorry, property taxes thing, or it pays for all our local government. I understand some. We are 49 property, not top taxer. Also, is there some way, okay, some temporarily, can we ask that we make it unset? That way we say, okay, it's for this year and next, no, we're gonna just make it short. And because 2025 is gonna be here and we're gonna have because we will not be. And I Everybody loves you.
I'm gonna turn as red as my hair once more. I do want to say, just to address that. We've had a property tax cut that we passed last year, or reduction for 23 and 24. And I know there's talk, and the governor said in his speech about doing it again. But I'm of the mindset of, let's see what happens with 23, 24, because we are on a fiscal cliff. Because we've had so much federal money come in, and we've spent so much and created so many different line items in our budget, that if once we lose that federal money, you know, what will that do to our budget? And I know that's one thing the governor is concerned about, why we're trying to keep a 15% reserve fund, because we think a recession is coming, even though the market was up today, right? But we still think that a recession is coming. All these indicators are, if it does happen and we see a decline in revenue, we are in serious trouble. So we need to plan ahead. So if we do some kind of property tax relief, I really want to see it, as you said, sunset, but also means tested. Okay, means tested, because there's so many people that are on fixed incomes who are not working anymore, who are getting priced out of their homes. And I would like to see the homestead exemption transferable from a home that you've had for 10 years to a downsize of a home that you just bought, because you're already qualifying for it. You're doing what you can to stay within your budget. Why should you lose that when you downsize? No.
He's gonna make it happen. Not this year, but I believe.
Thank you, John, for your question. Yes, the governor is definitely a believer in the labor curve, and I have heard him say multiple times that the way to increase our tax rate is to tax it. So, you know, there are some just baseline disagreements that I think are hard to get past on an issue like that. But I agree, it is a shame that we are just bottom of the nation for pay and mental health, because we just do not invest in our young people. And we have to do something about it. As David said, because of labor, every decision that we make to increase funding in one decreases funding in another. And so we have to figure out ways around that. Representative Kip, who represents Fort Collins, has introduced an option to have to go to the voters, but it would allow the state to keep money above the timber cap specifically to use for our public schools. And I'm a co-sponsor on that, but you know, we'll see what the government.
I'm curious. But for the action. Well.
I'm sorry, I was reading the rules today during a Republican filibuster. And I'm gonna have to double check on the rules, but certain referendums, we do not need the governor's approval if we have votes in the House and the Senate, so I'll have to double check that.
All right, at this time, before we close out, I really want to recognize the other electeds in the room. So if you are currently serving, please stand up or raise your hand if you're already standing up. So we got Gretchen, right, with and Joan Andy from the board. If you hang out afterwards, you don't just have to come talk to us. You got all levels, a lot of levels here represented. So please have a conversation. I cannot thank y'all enough to spend an hour of your evening. You could be doing so many other things, but democracy is a participation sport, right? We only get a good democracy when we're participating. So thank you for being here. If you didn't get your question answered, we still have cards. You can write them down and our officers will work to get you answers. Come hang out, have a conversation. Thank you so much.
How are you?
Yes.
Thank you.